Thank you for joining us today. Today's session will be on Sage X3 year-end planning and 1099 processing. Today, Doug Hart and Ed Holleran will be our presenters. Doug is a senior ERP consultant. He has worked with various ERP solutions since 2000. Doug's vast background has allowed him to be involved in hundreds of projects at many different levels, from kickoff to developing custom applications. Doug is truly an asset to us here at RKL. And Ed will be kind of in support of Doug today, and we will also have Leanne, our customer support specialist, coming in at the end should you have any other questions, maybe specifically on 1099. But Ed is a senior Sage X3 architect. He has been with RKL for over 10 years and has been working with the Sage consulting world for over 20. Ed has a specialty in X3 financials, distribution, costing, and fixed assets. And then don't forget your RKL account reps are Gia Lane on the East Coast and Mike Scher on the West Coast. Please don't hesitate to contact them should you have any questions regarding your Sage solution. So without delay, let's get started, Doug.
Thanks, Danica. So welcome, everyone. Hope you will find today's session helpful. We're going to go ahead and jump right in and go ahead and just cover our agenda here. We will walk through a year-end checklist of tasks that you'll need to perform prior to doing your year-end close. We'll also cover some managerial reports that will help you wrap up that year-end process. We'll walk through the actual closing of the last fiscal period and year, and we will discuss some financial reporting aspects and some other considerations, including generating your 1099s and updating default date parameters for your X3 reports. So our goal is to give you an overview of the steps that you'll need to close out the year. If you've done a period end close before, it's very similar to that process, but there are some specific tasks that are required for year end. Before we do get started, just make a mental note that fiscal year end does not have to be closed immediately. It's recommended to keep the year open until you've got your final audit entries processed. And you can run the year-end simulation function before performing the actual close. By running the simulation, there are no journals created, and the fiscal year is not officially closed. However, it does roll forward the balance sheet balances, and this allows you to run trial balance for the new year without having formally closed the current year. This simulation also will update the beginning balances for most reports and inquiry screens, but you will need to make certain that the fiscal year-end flag for those reports is either included or excluded as required for analysis. So we've got a few items listed here that relate to operational transactions that need to be processed all the way through the system before you can do your period or year-end close. So you'll want to make sure that your receipts and deliveries have been validated and invoiced, that your sales invoices and credit memos have been posted, your purchase invoices and credit memos have been posted, and that all payments have been posted. You'll also want to consider running the dimension balance recovery function, which allows X3 to resync the tables in which dimension balances are stored. If you're a manufacturer or distributor, you'll want to make sure that you've done your physical inventory. If you have subcontracting, you'll want to make sure that those subcontracting costs have been calculated and posted. And you want to make sure that the stock accounting interface and the WIP accounting interface have both been posted and do not generate any errors. And you'll notice that we've referenced the X3 function names for most of the tasks here, as each bullet point indicates here at the FUNC, FMINV, for example, for your sales invoices, BPC val for credit memos. Some financial considerations to walk through before you do your closing. You want to make sure that your accrual entries have been created and their reversals have been generated if need be. You want to generate your recurring entries if you have any. And if you're not running the fixed asset module, that you've generated depreciation entries. If you do have intercompany transactions, you want to make sure that you've verified those intercompany balances, the due to and due from balances within each entity. You'll want to review the accounts for all of your variance and clearing accounts, such as your received not invoiced and your suspense account. If you have a non-stock managed product that isn't going to go through the purchase receipt process, then you'll want to make sure that you've accrued for any non-inventory items that you may have received but do not have the vendor or supplier's invoice for. You want to reconcile that RNI account against those receipts. And you'll want to make sure that you've generated your multi-currency revaluation entries if you are processing in more than one currency. You might also want to take this opportunity to review your dimensional allocations to ensure that the rules that you've set up for dimension postings has been adhered to. So if you've got a requirement that all expenses have a department populated, for example, just review those expense entries to ensure that that's the case. And in order to do the period end, you will have to make sure that any simulated journal entries have been either deleted or made actual, as that period end process won't allow you to move forward with those simulated entries. If you are using the fixed asset module, then you'll want to review the posting type in the depreciation context to ensure that all periods are set to actual. When you set up those fiscal periods, X3 does default that posting type to simulation, so you want to ensure that those have been flipped to actual. You want to make sure that the journal entries for depreciation have been posted through. And you'll want to go review the status of contexts in fixed assets processing's block to ensure that all the lights are green for your inactive, calculated, and posted elements, so that you can be sure that the period end close can proceed for fixed assets. And unlike general ledger, the fixed asset periods cannot be reopened, so you do want to make sure that you've got everything properly processed through before you do run through that closing of the fixed asset period. And the fixed asset period does have to be closed before you can close the GL period. You'll also want to ensure that you've performed the bank reconciliation for each of your bank accounts and tied those to the appropriate statement. You may also want to be mindful of the fact that you can restrict postings in a couple of different ways with the X3 to prevent a user from posting a transaction through when you are at the point where you're ready to perform your period end close. So you can lock those down either by module to prevent users from being able to enter purchase invoices or journal and batch entries, customer invoices, supplier invoices, payments, open item statements, entry of expense lines, and automatic payment proposals and sales invoices. In addition to being able to enforce those instructions at the module level, you can also enforce some restrictions based on the document type date range by setting the validity date, or at the journal code level by setting the journal code to deactivated or by using journal code access codes. One thing to note, the General Ledger Detail report that you can run to view the transactions that have been posted in the system, the out-of-the-box version does not include the entered date or the system date and time at which the entries were posted, nor does it include the user ID. So if you would like to have that information available to you, you can certainly add those fields if you're comfortable with modifying Crystal reports. If you don't have any in-house Crystal expertise, then you can certainly reach out to RKL. We've provided that modification to the General Ledger Detail report for other clients and would be happy to work with you to get that taken care of for your company if you would find that useful. It's a fairly quick and easy modification to the Crystal report that gives you a fair amount of value for chasing down those entries that may have been put through the system after the point you thought that you had prepped the module for closing. So we've listed some of the reports that you'd want to consider running at the end of the period here. And some of these report names may be new to you. The report codes may be new to you. These are changed. Some of them have changed in V12. So the BAL age group for your customer or supplier aging, the BAL age group dev for the GL trial balance. You might also want to consider a requester that RKL has developed for matching the detail for your RNI account. As long as you are posting your receipts in full, so not doing any partial receipts, that requester should work for you. We also have in the fixed asset module a FAS list depth report for your fixed asset listing. Again, the out-of-the-box version is missing a few things that I think most clients would find helpful. For one, the accumulated depreciation, and another item that it's missing would be the ability to group the report by, for example, the family or group code that you would tie to your assets. So RKL, again, has modified that for clients to add those additional fields and grouping options to the Crystal report. So if that would be of interest to you, feel free to reach out to either your RKL consultant or to a member of our support team. We also have developed a ZWIP requester. So that's a custom requester that gives you the ability to tie out what you have in your work in process account and reconcile it on a work order by work order basis. So it definitely helps to simplify that reconciliation process by having that level of detail. You'll want to ensure that you've run through the final validation of your journal entries for all remaining temporary 2020 entries, and review the pre-closing report to identify any blocking errors for the period end process. If you've run period end processing before, you're probably familiar with that Clopper report that gives you that detail for those issues that might prevent you from performing the close. You'll want to ensure that you do your stock close first before you do your period close. And if you are performing that period close in the final month of your fiscal year, it will notify you to that fact when you go to do that. And before you do that close process, you do want to ensure that you do have at least the first period of the coming year set to be open, so that you won't have any issues posting to those, to that next period. So when you're ready to run the actual closing, you do want to make sure that all of the users have logged out of X3, and keep in mind that the journal monitor, the EDI monitor, and the ADC monitor do all need to be stopped because those are each considered to be users in X3's environment. So you will need to make sure that those have stopped, and you'll want to turn off your accounting tasks. You want to also confirm that the new PR journal and new PR document type exist. Those are used to create those closing entries for the year. You'll also want to take a moment to review the sequence numbers for your document types to ensure that those are set to either roll forward or not as you wish for the new year. And then you'll also want to verify the parameters for your analytical balance forward and GL balance forward to make sure that those are both set to yes. You'll also want to pop into the chart of accounts function and review the miscellaneous accounts tab and confirm that line 11 does contain your retained earnings account. Any other lines in that screen are not used for the closing process, but you may need values populated in those lines in order to avoid generating errors. Unlike the fixed asset period, the GL year can be reopened in order to enter any audit adjustments after the fact if need be. The actual function to perform that year-end close is found under your financials block in the closing processing's fiscal year-end function. As I mentioned earlier, you can run the simulation first by checking the simulation box that's in the center of the screenshot we've got here. And that will help you to identify any potential errors that might pop up during the close process. If you have cleared the checkbox and go ahead and move forward with the actual close, that will create the journal entries. It'll close those profit and loss accounts into your retained earnings account and establish the proper beginning balances for your balance sheet accounts. You'll want to take this opportunity to also use either Sage Enterprise Intelligence or a financial data extractor to verify your report balances at year end, and make sure that the ending balances for 12/31/2020 tie out to your beginning balances for 1/1 of 2021. If you're maintaining budgets in X3, you do have a couple of options for handling the budgets for the new year. You can either create new budget codes for the 2021 year, or you can import your 2021 budget amounts into your existing budget codes. Just a note here that if you are using SEI for your financial reporting, it may save you some time and aggravation to use those existing budget codes that may already be mapped into your financial reports rather than creating new budget codes for 2021. For operational budgets, you want to make sure that your carryover budgets have been calculated if need be. And if you're maintaining price lists in X3 for either sales or purchasing, you'll want to review those to ensure that those are updated for the coming year if need be. Remember that you can import either those sales price lists or the purchasing price lists. And you do want to be mindful of the dates that are, the validity dates that are set up for those price lists to ensure you don't have a gap between the end of one price list period and the beginning of the following price list period. If you have product that you are maintaining at standard cost, the system will continue to use the old standard cost until a 2021 standard has been created. You can copy the current raw material standard to a simulated cost, then update your raw material simulated standards and perform your BOM cost roll-up on the finished goods in order to get those simulated costs, and then copy those 2021 costs that are simulated into your 2021 standard costs. Alrighty, so for those of you who are required to file Form 1099 for supplier payments, you've probably heard that there's a new 1099 form that was introduced by the IRS in 2020. It's Form 1099 NEC. That particular form, if you do need to process that non-employee comp for your suppliers, you'll need to apply the 2020 Form 1099 patch for version 11 and 12. To get to the 1099 processing, you would go to the Fee Declaration United States Processing's block, and then in that section, you can see on the screenshot over on the right-hand side, the payment amounts can be edited using the 1099 payment summary function. So if you happen to have either migrated to X3 mid-year and had not updated the 1099 beginning balance for payments that were issued from your previous ERP system, or if you had failed to track 1099 payments earlier in the year for a particular vendor, you can come in and edit those amounts in the task here. And then down in the processing section is where you would actually perform the calculation of those 1099 payments once you've verified that those 1099 payment amounts are correct, and actually print those forms. X3 does not print the formatted IRS forms. It will print the data onto pre-printed forms. So you can go to any office supply store, pick up those pre-printed forms, and then drop them in your printer, and X3 will drop the data into the appropriate location for each box.
Hey, Doug, this is Danica. We have a couple questions.
Yes.
Are there any form constraints for the 1096, 1099 forms in Sage X3, or are general forms from office supply stores adequate? You just said that.
Yes, ma'am.
They are on version 7. Will they still be able to patch for the 1099 NEC?
So I believe we may have Leanne Sagan on the line, and Leanne wrote a blog for RKL's website that covers the details of the 1099 NEC. Is Leanne on?
I am on. Currently, there was an update that was for 2019 in January that was one patch that will allow versions 9 and up to be able to start setting up the NEC form for the vendors and allow you to edit payments and mark them for NEC. There's still another patch expected anytime now, which would be able to handle printing of 1099 forms for versions 11 and 12. And I looked right before this meeting to see if Sage had made an announcement of the 2020 1099 update, and I haven't seen it yet. So I'm still waiting for that. For versions prior, like version 9, we'll have to create a 1099 printable form for those, and then any versions prior, we won't have the option of being able to select NEC form. So most likely you'll have to modify the data outside of X3. So we're still discussing versions PU9 and less, but it would be specific to versions prior to PU9 that you can't change the data or print out the 1099. So we're still reviewing that for a resolution for people right now.
Okay.
Thanks,
Great.
Leanne. So stay tuned.
Stay
Yep.
tuned.
And then there's one other there's one other question. If you do the year-end simulation in X3, do you still need to run your SEI year-end simulation when running reports?
That's an excellent question, one which I'm happy to let Ed Hatler answer.
Yes, you do, but I am double checking with Scott Watts on this one.
Okay, so we'll circle back on that.
Yeah. Okay, that's.
Oh, sorry, Dedeka.
You may continue. Thanks.
Thanks.
Doug, I did have information on the SEI year-end simulation process. It does have to be ran in the SEI as well.
Thank you for confirming. Leanne is a wealth of knowledge, in case you didn't know.
Makes me sound old.
No, it doesn't. Just smart. One other thing to note on the 1099 processing in X3, electronic filing is not supported within X3, but there are several third-party apps that exist that allow you to take the data from a text file, Excel, etc., upload it either through a website or deliver it through FTP or whatnot to be able to perform that electronic filing. Okay, one of the other things that you'll want to ensure that you're checking after you've done your close is the date range after the new year begins. Go ahead and make sure that you've verified that ENDDAT value in the default date parameters here underneath setup general parameters. It's the sixth row, the last row in my screenshot here. You want to make sure that that value is set at least a year in the future. X3 looks at this date and prevents any transaction posting beyond that date. So it's okay to set that date further ahead, more than 1 year ahead if you wish. In this case, we've got a few years ahead just to ensure that that doesn't wind up being a stopping point for you for processing your transactions in X3. And that is all I had.
Thanks for joining us today, and have a great holiday. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Leanne.
Thanks, everyone.